that when his dad was winning Bathurst, young Glenn was in a bassinet at Mount Panorama.
Sorry, Mike. Just had confirmation through that Alan Grice's problem was indeed tyres, and he's gone in and gone for a softer set of Yokohama cross plies. And that's got the Commodore back on the boil once more.
This might work in Glenn's favour. Having Alan Grice in your rear-view mirror will probably disturb Tony Longhurst a touch, and that could allow Glenn just to creep away.
They head up to Motorcraft Hill again. Richards, meantime, opening the gap over Glenn Seaton. So 1-3 at the moment for Team JPS BMW. As they go across the line, it's lap number 40. Jum Orchards for JPS leads at Glenn Seaton is second, and no below 2 of 60 for round 3 of the Australian Touring Car Championship, and double trouble for Dick Johnson Shell Ultra High team today. Teammate Greg Hansford is in the pits. He's had problems during the course of the race. Winds up in the pits, parked next to Dick. And he was coming on strong. He was involved, of course, in that scrap earlier. Dick moves along to find out what was going wrong with his car. In the meantime, the battle for 4th and 5th continues.
Larry Perkins is some 17 seconds down on Tony Longhurst in this 4th position, behind him Peter Brock, as you can well see. Originally behind these two drivers we had Hansford. He pulled in during the break. So a race within a race for the minor placings. And around about 4 seconds covers the top 3 drivers. That's Jim, Glenn Seaton and Tony Longhurst.
Out of the carousel. It's been quite a week for Peter Brock, as we've detailed this week. 42 years of age is our Peter from Melbourne, company director. First in the 74, 78 and 80 Australian Touring Car title. 8 times winner of the James Hardie 1000, 9 times Castrol 500 victor. And 6th, the 87 Australian Touring Car Championship at 18 points. Stats courtesy of Nissan know how. And Peter Brock knows how this week. The number 6 car was originally assigned for Gary Scott of Queensland. But Pete found himself without 0.5, his regular ride, on Thursday when Scotty was bedding in some brakes and a motor. He gave it the Errol Flynn touch, straight off the racetrack and into the wall, demolished the car. And Scotty is a spectator today. Crocky takes over the number 6 car. Not doing too bad at all, running 5th on the road at the moment.
Brock's gone for a very hard suspension setup, realising that this was a 1-hour race, and he didn't quite know how to prepare for it. And also experimenting with some new Bridgestone tyres this weekend, and they've gone for a completely new case construction. And Larry Perkins indeed using a new radial Dunlop tyre called a D14, an experimental tyre. The two of them at the moment absolutely nose to tail. That tells you how much the rivalry is between the tyre companies at the moment, how even they are, producing some great racing. Former chief engineer and team leader when they were together, now running their own operations. And their fortunes have brought them back onto the track nose to tail 2 years after they first broke up here at Lakeside in 1985.
Perkins at the wheel of the NZ Fluid Connectors Commodore. Fastest hose doctor at Lakeside today is Larry Perkins. And Rocky and he have been having a great duel for probably now 10 to 12 laps.
Larry's got 27 points on the board in the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car Championship. Quite a fair way down on Jim Richards with 41. Rocky's further down behind him in 6th place with 18 points. So this is a crucial battle for Brock to try and get some valuable points in the 9-round series. They're coming up behind Denny Holman. Denny was the driver that partnered Larry Perkins to a win in the Pukekarre 500-kilometre race in January this year in New Zealand.
They come down the roller coaster. Just ahead of them, of course, this marvellous dice between Glenn Seaton, Tony Longhurst and Alan Grice. And they're still on the boil. Jimmy Richards continues to lead the Australian Touring Car Championship round for the Shell Ultra Series. This is the race for second. Glenn Seaton, Tony Longhurst And of course behind them, Alan Grice, but he's down a lap.
One of the things that the Nissan team are experimenting with this weekend, and indeed they've embarked on a new campaign involving some new technology, is a new engine management system and a total diagnostic computer and keyboard. There's Frank Gardner, a worried man, wondering the fortunes of his two drivers. Alan Grice pulls out to pass Tony Longhurst. Pretty hard to do that with his flying BMW, but it's becoming a great three-way battle. Look at Tony up on the outside. Glenn covers his tracks. He knows how to make it difficult for Tony. Certainly not doing anything wrong. Playing within the spirit of the rules. This new engine management system on the Nissan is developed by a company called Lakeside in the United States, and it's Brett Gibson's idea to institute this new type of system on the car early in the season, so that when these cars go from the 100 octane avgas that they currently use down to 90 octane supergrade pump fuel after September, they'll be well and truly ready for it. It brings the power on a little smoother, gives an overall better fuel-air mixture ratio into the engine. They can therefore turn the boost up at any given point in the rev range. And although the car doesn't have more horsepower than it currently churns out, it uses what horsepower it's got just a little better.
Here comes Gricey down the outside. Oh, that does it too. Now that will do anything but make Tony Longhurst happy. And that really does put a bit more pressure on Glenn Seaton, because Gricey is down a lap. And he's trying to get that back, get back on the same lap as the leaders. But at this stage, his choice of tyres certainly paying off for him. The only problem being that he had to take a pit stop to change them. Started off on a hard compound. Just ahead of them, of course, is Colin Bond in the Caltex Team Alfa Romeo, the Turbo 75.
They've had a lot of work done on this car, and by gee, it's improved its performance this weekend with an additional 50 or 60 brake horsepower, thanks to Joe Beninka in Melbourne, one of the Alfa specialists down there. We've seen his brother Dominic perform very well in sports sedan racing. Alan Grice coming out from behind Glenn Seaton, trying to unwind the lap. Great shot from Simmons Race Cam. Unusual to see Glenn having a dab on the brakes through the kink, and he runs very wide, almost gets this out in the dirt. Up behind Bondi. That's the sort of pressure that race drivers come on under. They have to consider the guy in front, the guy alongside, and the guy behind. A busy young man, 21-year-old Glenn Seaton. A big intercooler on the Alfa now, and far more than the car in the first two rounds. And he's holding these drivers at the moment, and Gricey is really starting to serve. This is a part where Grice has a lot of trouble getting some 420 horsepower to the ground. Motorcraft fuel, the run down, it's not too bad, although the car gets very skatey at the bottom of this run. It's a real roller coaster. We'll see whether or not Glenn's on the brakes again as he goes through the left hand down the bottom. Perhaps he just was a little uncomfortable with his turn in as they cross the line this time. It'll be 10 laps to go. The V8 horsepower of the Commodore just working very nicely for Alan Grice as they go through the kink. Glenn has a look at the passenger side of the Bob James T-Mart's entry, and Grice manages to unwind himself from at least Glenn Seaton, but he's still got a job to do on Jim Richards.
They exit the turn now. There's our shot out the back of the Commodore. That pass has made no difference to the race lead, of course. It has taken a little of the pressure off Glenn Seaton. He is slowed just a whisker, and you'll notice Tony Longhurst will be very close to him by the time they reach the top of the hill. So Gricey, after that pit stop, has come back and looked very competitive indeed in the Bob J. T-Mart's VL, having its first run here today at Lakeside.
What will be interesting is to just check the gap between first and second and get some idea as to whether Glenn is going back. We'll do that shortly. Colin Bond must be a much happier man now with the improved performance of the Alfa 75, and Richard Hay, our European correspondent, warned us at the start of the season that with the car being tipped in Europe is the real worry for this season. It's now 8.19 seconds between leader Jim Richards and second placed Glenn Seaton, so if anything, Jim is pulling away. There's Bondi. James Hardy winner, rally champion, touring car champion, Mr. Everything in Australian motorsport, been around a long, long time. And a much happier Colin Bond this morning, safe in the knowledge his car was performing better. Jim Richards is the leader. Glenn Seaton in second place, and Tony Longhurst is third with 10 laps to go in the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Cup.
54 of 60 laps now completed for round 3 of the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car title in Brisbane's Lakeside Raceway. The man leading the fleet at the moment is Jimmy Richards in the JPS BMW, the new M3. The car, of course, that dominated the opening round of the World Touring Car Championship 3 weeks ago at Monza, Italy. What a formation, 6 of them across the line, and 6 then disqualified, which gave the win, of course, to Alan Moffat and John Harvey. But Frank Gardner has persevered with his M3s, and of course the 2 team drivers, Richards and Longhurst, and will be rewarded, it would seem, here this afternoon at Lakeside, as Jim powers onto the start-finishing straight yet again. With about 5 laps remaining, I would think the happiest man at Lakeside would surely be Frank Gardner. Colin Young?
Well, Frank, you should be happy. Jim's leading the race, but Tony's got some problems.
Tony hit a curb nice and early on, and he's had a bit of a wheel alignment problem, so he's a bit of a tyre worry at the moment. But if his tyres hold out, he's still in good shape.
Can he get past Seaton for second, do you think?
If Seaton has his way, no.
Well, Frank, a lot of controversy a couple of weeks ago in Italy with the BMW, but a fine performance here today.
Well, the scrutiny has sat on us for a few days, so if there's whatever happened in Italy, goodness only knows, but we're not involved in it, so we just had to have a motor race.
What about, you had some comments earlier on about the increased performance of Dick Johnson's Ford Sierras?
Well, it was pretty impressive. Rumours have it that there's a little bit of a scrutineering problem with it. The scrutineers are going to look at the turbo on it, whether or not, you know, there's anything illegal. Only time will tell.
Okay, Frank Gardner, team manager for BMW, and he's in charge of the race-winning car, Jim Richards. Mike.
Thank you, Cole. An in-depth interview with Frank Gardner. And Frank, of course, patting his drivers on the back and not wanting to be drawn into anything. That's Frank. And there's Jim coming up on Denny Hulme, not having the best of days in the John Andrew Motorsport Ford Sierra. Car that has been campaigned by Neville Crichton in a couple of races this year. They're also hopeful of achieving the same development results as Dick Johnson for their car over the next couple of races.
Performances for this little car so far in the championship haven't been too bad. Jim Richards, a 5th from round 1 after getting pole on the Saturday, 2nd down at Symonds Plains, and looks like he might climb into the winner's rostrum today's round. Let's have a look at the actual gap between Richards and the battle for 2nd place between Seaton and Longhurst. Richards in the 4th round, and a country mile back to 2nd and 3rd. There they are, and Tony Longhurst working very, very hard at trying to get to make it a JPS BMW 1-2.
You have to cast your mind back to the spot where Jim was able to nobble his way past Glenn Seaton on the approach to Hungary Corner. Tony just wasn't close enough to be able to follow him through, and because of that he's had to battle with Glenn Seaton for the probably 3/4 of the race. They come out of the FM 104 sweeper, and quite clearly you can see the gap between 2nd and 3rd. 3 laps remain in round 3 of the Shell Ultra Australian Touring Car title. And I think we've seen enough today to suggest that when Dick Johnson cures his little problems with the Ford Sierra Cosworth, no one particular car or team has a laydown was there on the touring car title races for the rest of the season. Across the line, 2 laps remain. There's our race leader, Jimmy Richards, car number 3 for Team JPS. Had an absolutely fantastic season back in 85, and he won the Australian Touring Car title. Won 7 of the 10 rounds. Was unbeaten at Sydney's Amaru Park in the Better Brakes Amscar Series.
Tony Longhurst just starting to drift back now from this dice. So it looks as though it's going to be JPS BMW, Peter Jackson Nissan, and JPS BMW, the order at the end of the 60 laps.
Coming on to the start-finishing straight with 1 lap to go. Jimmy Richards from Victoria. Streaks down through the sweeper, down towards the right-hander at the carousel. Has driven an impeccable race. Is involved in the scrap with Dick Johnson and any number of other cars in the opening laps. Was able to get through on the inside of Glenn Seaton. Once in front, he's opened the gap all the time. Beneath the bridge, and now down to Hungry Corner. It's been a long time between Australian touring car rounds for Jim. He picked up a result at the Winton Raceway round last year, basically because the leading Nissan was eliminated from the results because of a technical breach. Coming off Shell Ultra High turn, down the roller coaster. The last turn, this finishing straight, checkered flag at the ready, and Jimmy Richards is going to strike gold here today at Lakeside International Raceway. He takes round 3. Second spot will go to Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline driver Glenn Seaton, who comes through the turn now, and running third all the way to the flag is going to be Tony Longhurst. Probably the best touring car race of the season, round 3 of the Shell Ultra Nationals here today at Lakeside International Raceway. Let's recap the place.